Hello students, in the previous video we have seen what you mean by resonance and its examples, very important for your ICSE examination. So today in this video we are going to learn about what you mean by characteristics of sound and its subjective and objective in nature. What actually the sound characterization or characteristics of sound we are going to see in this today's chapter. So before starting up, we will discuss of something what happens in our day-to-day life. So what actually happens? See, every day we are going to hear few of the sounds. We see that people speaking to each other, we are going to hear those sounds. We see vehicles moving from one place to another place where it produces sound, even we hear those sounds. And we are even hearing the sounds of animals like dog is barking, about the cat, what is the sound it is going to produce. So every time we are able to distinguish. We are able to even distinguish the different sounds of cars also. If we hear the sound of a car, we will tell that this is this type of a car which has been come. If your dog's barking, we will correctly tell that it's a dog is been barking. So when we hear both, we know that it is male voice, it is a female voice, we can easily differentiate. But how actually we can do this? So in today's class, we will discuss about what you mean by characteristics of sound. See here. Characteristics of sound and their subjective and objective nature. So among that, two sounds can be distinguished from one another by the three different characteristics. See, if you take any, for example, two sounds, easily we can distinguish. Is it not? We can do or not? We can differentiate. Which sound is what? How actually you can do that? To do that, we have three different characteristics. What are the three different characteristics are? First one is called as loudness. What it is? Loudness. And the second one we call what you mean by pitch, or it is also called as shrillness. And the third one we have what is quality, and it is also called as timbre. There are some factors which affects this. First let me tell you about it, then we will go for a detailed explanation of that. See here loudness. Loudness depends on what you mean by amplitude. What it is? Amplitude. Pitch or shrillness depends on the term frequency. And the last characteristics of sound, that is quality or timbre, depends on what you mean by waveform. How actually loudness depends on amplitude, pitch or shrillness depends on frequency, quality or timbre depends on waveform, we can quickly find it out. So let us discuss in this class one by one what are the soft and loud notes, different graphical notations of everything. So let us, before starting the concept of loudness, I will just demonstrate you a small experiment. Students, can you see here? I have just taken the utensils what we are going to use in your kitchen. Just I have a spoon in my hand and a steel plate. Both are steel. Now just observe what I am going to do. Can you hear the sound? Have you heard it? And next time you see the different what it is with the next one. This time I have hit it very hard. Before that I have hit very slowly. How can you differentiate this? We can easily tell that the first one was very faint and the second one which I have hit is very loud. How can you do that? So in order to understand that concept, let us go with what is the actual meaning of loudness and how it depends on amplitude. Thank you. We have. Now come to the loudness. What actually the loudness is? Loudness is the characteristic by virtue of which, what it is? A loudness is a characteristic. First of all, we told loudness is one of the characteristics of sound. Characteristic by virtue of which a loud sound can be distinguished from a faint one. Both have same pitch and quality. Did you understand? So I have taken a plate and I have taken a steel spoon and simply. First when I hit hard, you are not able to hear a very big sound. Very next time what did I do? I had hit a very loud one. So easily you were differentiating that the second one was a loud sound, the first one was a faint sound. It is a faint sound when compared to that of the second one. Is it not? How could you do this? We have done because we know that how it is being affected with an amplitude in order to understand. And remember one thing, both of them have same pitch and same quality. I am just telling you it has same pitch and quality. What are the factors which relates with pitch and quality? means pitch is related with that of frequency. We already know what is frequency. Frequency is number of times a particle vibrate in 1 second. Did you understand? And what do you mean by a waveform? Number of times the wave is being passing. Did you understand? Since they both has the same. Why it had the same? See, in the case of plate, if I have it only the plate, the first time also I had it had produced a faint sound. The second time when I had it produces a loud sound. But what about the frequency of the plate? Frequency of the plate remains the same. That means pitch has or shrillness of that particular thing has remained the same. So the frequency is also same. How does it affect? So let us quickly find it out. See, we have a soft and loud notes graphical representation. What it is? Soft and loud notes. Which was soft? The very first one which I had hit, it is called a soft note. So this is a soft note, this is a diagram. This is a graphical representation of displacement and time graph. We have a waveform here. Can you see the waveform? So this is being the amplitude and this is a waveform. This produces very small amplitude, hence it is called as soft notes. When I see the loud notes, when I hit very hardly the plate, what it produces? It produces a loud note. Here what it is being increasing? We can see the increase in its amplitude where the waveform is the same. Look at both waveform. Waveform is same. Why? Waveform is same and even the frequency of that particular material is what? Same. Keeping the frequency and waveform is a constant. What is being changing in this? It is amplitude which is changing. So that by this change in amplitude we can easily tell that loudness always depends on what? Loudness always depends on the factor of amplitude. Did you understand? Loudness always depends on amplitude. Now, loudness of the sound depends on the amplitude of the wave. What it is? Loudness always depends on the amplitude of the wave. Here, that is, with mathematical representation, we can tell L is directly proportional to that of A square. That is, square loudness is directly proportional to the square of the amplitude. It is one of the factors affecting the loudness also. Next, we have what is subjective nature of loudness and objective nature of intensity. So, before going to the subjective nature of what it is loudness and objective nature of intensity, first let us understand what actually the meaning of intensity is. See, intensity is nothing but, now in this case I am considering unit area of cross section. Here the sound energy is being traveling. The sound is traveling in the form of waves. How much sound energy travels in a form of wave per 1 second per second, which is normal to the area of cross section. What it is? Area of cross section is nothing but what you mean by intensity. See, what do you mean by intensity here? It is a form of sound energy. The amount of sound energy which is being in a form of waves, which is being passing through a unit cross section area, which is normal to the area of cross section, is nothing but what you mean by intensity. In an ICSE examination, they may ask you to define what you mean by intensity also. So you should be very careful. And even the unit, SI unit they ask is watt per meter square, is the SI unit of what you mean by intensity. Even this can be written as watt per meter square. This is the actual meaning of intensity. To make you to understand the concept of intensity, let me take a slightly a simple example. For example, think this box to be an river plastic. At this side, we have what you mean by blackboard. And the seating arrangement starts from here and ends till here. Assume that you are sitting here in a first bench and your friend is sitting at the last bench. When a teacher is teaching a lesson, by miss, what happened? The duster had fallen down. What happens at that time? Since you are very near, you could able to recognize it, that duster had fallen down. But what about your friend? Your friend is not able to know that. Sometimes he may recognize, sometimes he may not recognize. Understand? So this is because of what you mean by intensity. Intensity is what? The amount of sound energy which is passing in a form of wave through a per 1 second through a normal area of cross section. Did you understand? How this intensity and loudness and intensity is always directly proportional to each other. Let us come back to the relationship later. First, let us see what do you mean by subjective nature and what you mean by objective nature. Subjective nature means it may be different for others, for different people. But what do you mean by an objective? Objective is nothing but it is same for all the type of people. It is not of anything. It is not of any age gap. But what about you mean by subjective? Subjective may vary from person to person. So here, for a sound wave, loudness is subjective property. It always depends on the listener. For example, for example, think that all of you, your grandmother, your grandparents, your parents, and you yourself is watching a television. What actually you make? You keep a volume of 30, for example. For a 30 volume, you are able to hear very audible. But what about in the situation of your grandparents? They ask you to keep increasing the volume. Why? They should have lost the sensation of hearing bit much, because since age has been completed. Understand? So this loudness is a subjective matter. It depends on the listener. But what about this intensity? Intensity is being a measurable quantity. Means intensity, we already know that amount of sound energy which is traveling in the area of cross section. So that remains same for all. For any object you are considering, intensity remains same. But what about the loudness? Loudness is nothing but a disturbance which is causing in a medium in the form of amplitude, which is moving in a form of waves. Loud sound has a greater amplitude, a smaller amplitude. The soft notes has a smaller amplitude, loud notes has a higher amplitude. Did you understand now? What is the difference between why subjective nature of loudness and objective nature of intensity? Always what you mean by a subjective nature is it depends on a listener. It's a characterization of a listener. But what about intensity? Intensity, since it is a measurable quantity, it is objective in nature, means it is same for all. You are understanding? So this, after knowing the subjective nature of that, we still have to learn about. See, I am going to rub this graphs. In your textbook you can just see these graphs. Now we will go with relationship between that of So next we will see what you mean by what is the relationship. What is the relationship between that of loudness and intensity? This relationship between loudness and intensity is given by L is equals to K log 10 I. And this relation is also called as Weber-Fechner relation. They may ask you in your examination. This is Weber-Fechner relation. Here you already know the terms. L is nothing but loudness. L is nothing but loudness. What do you mean by K? K is nothing but constant of proportionality. What it is? Constant of proportionality. And here what you mean by I? I is nothing but it is intensity. Since we can see here L and I are directly proportional to each other, that is loudness increases with increase in what you mean by intensity. But remember one thing, intensity, if intensity increases, loudness increases, no doubt, but not in the same proportion. What we call it is not in the same proportion. For example, if you consider, if intensity increases of 100%, if intensity increases of 100%, your loudness increases by only 80%. Their proportion is not one and the same. Understand? Next we have what you mean by unit of loudness and sound level. Even this they are going to ask in your ICSE examination, very important. That is unit of loudness and sound level. So usually this unit of loudness is nothing but pion. Unit of loudness is measured by using pion unit. And we already know this sound level of sound is given by decibel. What it is? Decibel, which is denoted by the dB. You might have knowing what is the sound level. Sound audibility of sound is usually determined by the word, by the unit decibel. But remember, unit of loudness is determined by what you mean by pure. Understand? Next, we have what is the factors which is been affecting loudness. That is also very important. 2 mark question they are going to ask you. Next, we have factors affecting loudness of sound. So what are the factors affecting the loudness of sound is, first one, loudness is directly proportional to square of the amplitude. Is directly proportional to square of the amplitude. Very important factor it is. We know that already we have studied. See here, in this case, loudness depends on what? Amplitude. Before itself I had told, loudness depends on amplitude. Loudness depends on amplitude is square of the amplitude, that is directly proportional to a square. Very important. Loudness is directly proportional to the square of the amplitude. Very important factor which affects the loudness. The second one, loudness depends on square of the distance, inversely proportional, that is loudness is inversely proportional. Loudness is inversely proportional to the square of the distance. That is given by 1 by d square. See here. Since if it is given by L is inversely proportional to 1 by d square, what happens? With decrease in distance, loudness increases. For example, when you are sitting in a first bench in a classroom, the length between you and the teacher decreases. So what happens? Loudness increases. For example, you are sitting in a last bench, what happens? Distance increases. So what happens to the loudness? Loudness decreases. You are understanding? So very important second factor is this. And even the third factor is loudness is directly proportional to the area of the square. Loudness is directly proportional to area. See, if area increases, loudness increases. Area of the surface area, if it is increases, that is called as loudness also increases. This is the third factor. The fourth factor we have, loudness depends on density of the medium. This is also very important one. It also actually depends on density of the medium. If density increases, what happens to the loudness? Loudness also increases. The fourth one we have, the loudness depends on resonant bodies. What it is called as resonant bodies. We have resonant bodies. We know that already what you mean by resonance. In the last video we have seen what do you mean by resonance. Resonance is nothing but a body produces free vibrations and the other body matches with the natural vibrations of that. Hence form the concept what you mean by resonance. So when these resonant bodies are there, how could it affect the loudness? Can you think over? Yes. So when that resonant bodies are present, how does the loudness increases is this matches the force vibrations by a person. If it matches with the natural vibration of those resonant bodies, it may increase in the concept of what we mean by loudness. So this is a very important ICSE question they usually ask. Which are the factors affecting the loudness of the sound? Be prepared to any 4 points. Usually in examination there is 2 points. You be ready with the 4 points so that you can answer all. Then this is very important, that is unit of loudness and sound level. Remember, if they ask the unit of loudness, you just write pure. But if they ask the level of sound, you go with that decibel. Understand? Then this Weber-Fechner relation is very important. That is L is equals to K log I. That is loudness is directly proportional to that of intensity. With increase in intensity, even loudness increases. But remember, not in a same proportion. This is the complete concept of what you mean by loudness and amplitude. Next we are going to study what you mean by pitch or shrillness. So now we have what is the second characteristic is pitch, or even it is known as shrillness. And what we mean by frequency. And we know the factor frequency depends on what? Pitch. I mean pitch depends on a factor of what you mean by frequency. First, let us see the definition of what you mean by the pitch is. Pitch is the characteristic of sound by which an acute is also called as what you mean by shrill sound. Note can be distinguished from a grave sound. Grave is also called as what you mean by flat note of the same loudness. Here, the loudness and the quality remains the same, but what it is been changing, the frequency of that is changing. For example, how can we differentiate this type of characteristic of sound? I will give you an example. Now think that two persons are speaking with same loudness, but one is a man and the other one is a woman. How can we differentiate? We can easily differentiate whether that man is speaking, or in your home itself, you know that whether your daddy is speaking or your mother is speaking. How can you differentiate it? We are differentiating this character of sound by a factor called as what you mean by pitch or shrillness, and it is a pitch and shrillness depends on a factor what you mean by frequency. See the example for that. Voice of a woman is usually of higher pitch when compared to that of a man. Woman's voice is usually having higher pitch, that is shrillness, than that of man. That man voice is also called as grave note. Here it is called as shrill note and it is called as grave note. So therefore woman has a high pitch of note, high pitch. Then what about the man? Man has low pitch. And you can differentiate here. We have two waveforms I have been written, the displacement diagrams. In this case it is a low pitch, that is grave sound. Grave sound is usually what? It is man's. Can you see that? Can you compare the two graphs where the amplitude is of the same? See this, amplitude is of the same. Means if amplitude is same, what do you mean by that? If amplitude is same, loudness is same. Understand? If keeping the loudness of the same loudness, what is the factor affecting loudness? Amplitude. In these two graphs, keeping the amplitude and even the quality, because quality depends on what? Waveforms. Both of the waveforms are same. But what it is been changing? Here it is been changing with what you mean by frequency. How can you tell that frequency is changing? What do you mean by frequency? Number of waves, number of times a particle vibrating 1 second. That we can tell by using of waves. Look at here the gap between the wave. But here look at that waves is number of waves passing is more here. Understand? So this is considered to be what? High pitch note or what you mean by shrill note. So hence we can tell that here what about the frequency? Frequency here it is less and frequency here it is more. So this has high pitch and this has low pitch. For example, we have taken woman voice has high pitch, man voice is having low pitch. Understand? So by this we understood that pitch depends on a factor what you mean by frequency, where even the loudness and waveforms remains constant. How does the loudness remains constant in this both? Because it has same amplitude. What it is? It has same amplitude and we have same waveforms. There is no change in the waveforms, but only there is change in its frequency. If there is change in frequency, will cause you a change in characteristic of sound. What you mean by pitch? Understand? So the next we have what you mean by subjective and objective nature. In the case of pitch and frequency, already we have studied loudness and intensity. Loudness is what? It is subjective nature because it depends on persistence of hearing. It depends on person to person. But what about intensity? Intensity is not dependent. It is same for all. So intensity is objective nature. But in this case of pitch and frequency, what it is? Pitch is subjective. Even pitch is depending on person to person. It depends on their persistence of hearing. It is called as pitch. But what about frequency? Frequency is a measurable quantity. Like intensity, even frequency is a measurable quantity. So hence, always remember, pitch is subjective in nature, frequency is objective in nature. That is, frequency is always same for all, but pitch depends on person to person. With knowing the second concept, second characteristic of sound, that is pitch or shrillness, let us move to the last characteristic of sound, that is quality, or it is also called as timbre. And which is a factor that is great in quality is nothing but waveform. It is a very easily you can understand what is that quality or and a waveform. Let us first see the definition. Quality of a sound is the characteristic which distinguishes the two sounds of the same loudness. See that two sounds of same loudness. What do you mean by same loudness? It has same amplitude. Understand? And the same pitch. Pitch depends on which factor? Frequency. Means it has same frequency but emitted by two different instruments because of the waveform. Here I am considering two instruments. For example, if you see in this case of loudness, I have considered a steel plate and a spoon. I have it twice. One make a loud sound, the other make a soft sound. So how did I determine the loudness? I have determined the loudness by using amplitude. Higher the amplitude, loud sound. Lower amplitude, soft sound. But in the case of pitch, how did I mention? How did I measure the pitch? By using a frequency. How that woman's voice has high pitch and men's voice has low pitch. So frequency helped me to find the characteristics of what we mean by pitch. In pitch, we have same loudness. We have same loudness means we have same amplitude, and even the quality is same because the both waveforms are same. Now in the case of quality and timbre, we have same loudness and same pitch. Same loudness means, look at the graphs here, it has same amplitude. Is there any change in its amplitude? No, it is not changing any amplitudes. And same pitch, how it is same pitch depends on what? Frequency. Look at the number of waves which is being passing here. Is there any change in its? No, but what is the only thing changing in these two graphs is a waveform type. Here the waveform is of this kind, here it is triangular in shape. Can you look here the waveform? So if the waveform changes, how can you find it? Waveform changes means there is change in its quality. Therefore, if waveform depends on quality depends on a factor of what you mean by waveform. If you take two instruments, for example, you can take violin and guitar. Take violin and guitar. Produce the same sound. It will be having same loudness and same frequency, but still you can differentiate. This is a violin which is being played. This is a guitar you will be playing. How can you differentiate between violin and guitar? We can do so, but how do we do so is by the characteristic of what you mean by a waveform. Understand? So this is the graphical notation of that. Look here, it has same amplitude and same pitch, that is frequency, but there is change in this waveform. This waveform gives rise to the top violin, and this is the waveform of what you mean by guitar. If there is change in waveform, that is a characteristic of what you mean by quality. Understand? Now we have a last part of characterization of what you mean by sound, that is concept of music and noise. Among the characterization of sound, this is the last topic, that is music and noise. We usually know that what you mean by noise and what you mean by music. According to physics, what it is, let us quickly find it out. Now see here, all the sound which produces the sensation of hearing, all the sounds which produces the sensation of hearing to us, being divided into two categories. Which are those two categories? One is nothing but music, the other one is nothing but noise. Now what actually the music? Let us see. It is a pleasant, continuous and a uniform sound produced by a regular and periodic vibration. What do you mean by music is? It is a pleasant, no doubt. Music is always pleasant to us. If you are very much sad, always advise to just hear to your music. Why it is so? Because it is very pleasant and it is continuous and uniform sound produced by regular and periodic vibration. So this we can just see with the graph. Here is a displacement time graph of music. Look at, all have been produced continuously and it is even uniform in the sense the amplitude remains the same in all the cases, and it has equal frequency also. Waveform is same. Sound produced by regular periodic vibrations is nothing but what we mean by music. Understand? What is the example we have taken here? Sound produced by a violin, piano, all the musical instrument sounds which is been producing. No one of us tell it is a noise. We usually tell it is a music. And one more important note regarding music is the sound level is between 10 decibels to 30 decibels. Already I have told you that what is the unit of loudness. The unit of loudness is nothing but pion, but the level of sound is measured in always decibels. That is, the sound level is between 10 decibels to 30 decibels is termed as what you mean by music. Remember, if they ask the definition, you have to go with this definition itself. We are not able to write it down more. See, it is a pleasant, is a keyword, continuous and a uniform sound produced by a regular and periodic vibrations. Understood? And what is the limit of the sound in music? So the sound level is between 10 decibels to 30 decibels in the case of that. For example, if they ask you the example for the music is, you can write sound produced by a violin, piano, guitar, any of the musical instruments which are the things you know. I hope you have understood what you mean by music. Let us quickly find out what is the noise. So what is the noise here? Just this is the reverse form of music. See, let us see how do we define. The sound other than the musical sound is called as what you mean by noise. Is it not? So for example, you will be making noise in a class, means you are just speaking, all of you start speaking. Suddenly the teacher enters and tells, what is this noise? If that hears to us in a very like 10 to 30 decibels in speed form, does the teacher tells that? No, she never tells. Why? If it is this form and a continuous uniform sound, it looks like a music to her. She can hear like a music. But why does she tell it is a noise? Because it is not in a uniform way. See, it is the sound produced by an irregular sensation of the disturbances. First of all, it is what? An irregular sensation. For example, sound produced by a road roller. You all know that there is a construction of road which is being going. When you go near to a road roller, how you feel? You feel like you closing your ears. Why do you do so? Already we know that the sound level of that will be more than 120 decibels, which we are not feeling like hearing it. And one more thing they tell in your classrooms, pin drop silence. What actually the dropping pin sensation comes under 0 decibel. That is the least sound which we can hear. What it is? 0 decibels. That is the reason that form they tell that always a quotation, pin drop silence we should have. Means we should be able to hear even 0 decibel. For our human hearing, from 0 to 120 decibel we can. If it echoes the limit of 120, it is what? It is nothing but noise. But what is actually the music? Music is nothing but 10 decibels to 30 decibels. Can you see the note here? The sound level above 120 decibel is termed as what you mean by noise. And look at the graphical notation here. Does it is continuous like this? Does it regular like this? Like it is uniform sound produced? Periodic vibration is here. But what about the noise? You can see this all. It is not so uniform and continuous. This is termed what you mean by noise. Did you understand? So till here we have understood what you mean by characteristics of sound. The very important is all the graphical notations entirely of what you mean by loudness, maybe pitch or quality. It's very important, and all the definitions are important, and which are the factors affecting the characteristics of sound is very important. And the music and noise pollution is also very important, and go through the differences between all those. This is a very important ICSE question they ask. So here completes your sound chapter. From the next video, let us go with a new chapter called force. Until then, thank you. Take care.